Whenever we have a fraction, we can usually categorize this guy one of a number of ways. Now, the three common ways that we typically categorize fractions is either as a proper fraction, an improper fraction, or something called a mixed number. And we're going to talk about these three in this video, specifically improper fractions versus mixed numbers. But before we go there, let me remind you what a proper fraction is. A proper fraction is a divided by b, where a is smaller than b, such as like 2/3. This would be considered a proper fraction. If you had a piece of pizza that had 3 giant slices, you could have 2 of the 3 slices. This is a proper fraction that makes perfectly good sense. Now, you can actually have the numerator being larger than the denominator, but it's not a proper fraction any longer. It's called an improper fraction if a is greater than or equal to b. Here's an example. Maybe you have 11/3, or maybe you have 5/2, or 7/6. Things like that. All these would be considered as improper fractions. Now, in earlier grades, in the younger grades, teachers usually shy away from improper fractions. They would actually prefer to write these as what are called mixed numbers. A mixed number would be, here, let's take like 5/2 for example. 5/2 is an improper fraction, but if you think about that, this is 2 1/2, because 4/2 is 2 and 5/2 is an additional half. So you can write 5/2 as 2 1/2. So you have this whole part of the number, and then the leftover part beyond a certain whole number would be a proper fraction. In other words, you're getting rid of the improper fraction where the numerator is larger than the denominator. Now, moving forward from where we are in our class and moving forward, we're going to try to start to get away from mixed numbers a little bit. There's nothing incorrect about a mixed number. Mixed numbers are fine, but going forward, we will use more and more improper fractions. Because it's actually totally fine to have an improper fraction, and you'll find that it makes a lot of our algebra a lot easier if we think about improper fractions instead of mixed numbers. Now, that brings up a good question though. How do you go between one and the other? If you have a mixed number, how do you write that as an improper fraction? And if you have an improper fraction, how do you write that as a mixed number? Let's take a look at that. All right, if you have a mixed number, there's a process that you do that will turn this guy into an improper fraction, which we'll do quite often because that's going to help our algebra. It's going to make our algebra easier using the improper fraction way of writing a number as opposed to the mixed number. The process goes like this. It looks a little confusing at first, but it's actually not that bad. If you have a whole number a and a proper fraction b over c, we're going to take a times c. So this is times, and then we will add, so we'll do plus b. A times c plus b. It kind of looks circular. And so the way to write a with b over c as a proper fraction as an improper fraction is you'll have that a times c plus b, and you'll put that entire thing over c. Now, I know that looks confusing, but let's do a few examples and you'll find that it's not that bad. Here's a couple examples. Let's say you had 4 1/3, 4 1/3. So we'll take 4 times 3 is 12, and then we'll add 1 that makes 13. So this is 13/3. You keep the same denominator. Let's say we had 5 2/5. 5 2/5. 5 is a whole number, 2/5 is a proper fraction. So we'll take 5 times 5 is 25, add 2 makes 27, and we'll have 27 over 5. These are improper, these are mixed numbers, but they're still equivalent. Now, why does that work exactly? Well, watch this. Let's use a little algebra. You can actually break this guy apart over this addition sign here. You can break this apart into 2 fractions. You would have a times c over c plus b over c. But here we have a common factor of c, so the c's cancel. And you'll get a with a proper fraction of b over c remaining. So we see this traces back to what we originally had. So this process does in fact work. It just takes a little practice. Now what if you want to go in the other direction? What if you have an improper fraction where the numerator is larger than the denominator and you want to turn it back into a mixed number? Well, this is even simpler than the other way of converting from a mixed number to an improper fraction. We just do long division. You literally divide the numerator by the denominator. Let's look at an example. Let's say we had 11 thirds, which is definitely improper. 11 is bigger than 3. So what we'll do is we'll take 11 and we'll literally divide 3 into 11. 3 goes into 11 3 whole times. 3 times 3 is 9. 11 minus 9 leaves a remainder of 2. So 11 thirds would be the same as 3 and 2 thirds. So we can go in either direction, from mixed number to improper fraction or from improper fraction to mixed number.